kind of the only song on there that's kind of not embracing the atmosphere fully. You know, every other song is like, this is great, and I'm happy, and I want to have fun here, and I want you to know what it feels like. I want you to know what it took to get here, and I want you to know that it's worth it. And I don't ever want to say, I wish I wasn't famous again, or things like I've said in the past.
After all of the cover-ups, coping mechanisms, and crash-outs, Drake and his album, SSS4U, must now face the consequences. They can no longer avoid the reality. Music industry insiders, hip-hop fans, and the general public all agree that Drake's 21 song disaster is having a devastating impact on the genre. This is true, even though Drake and his entourage are living in a fantasy world where they are attempting to pretend that the record's performance is not experiencing a near 50% drop-off from Drake's most recent albums. It has failed more than anyone on Drake's side of the issue would ever want to acknowledge, now that the real figures for this record are out, and we are examining how the overall project is holding up. Please remember to subscribe and give a like before we get any farther into this. Given the current situation and Drake's catastrophic failure, therefore it goes without saying that Drake is attempting to make SSS4U seem like a success by making it seem like it belongs with the rest of his number ones. This is only because Drake has finally removed Party Next Door from the writer's room and given him a role and existence that people can see here. In actuality, this record has fared horribly, regardless of what they are attempting to convey. Despite 246,000 in the first week, watching numbers were barely over 200,000. The record only managed nearly 250 because disillusioned Drake fans conspired to promote the album in the hopes of increasing its sales, in the mistaken belief that it is being suppressed. Overall, when comparing this record's performance to Honestly Nevermind, which had similarly low sales and streaming numbers, it becomes clear that Honestly Nevermind had half the tracks. When considering the significance of this music and its place in the industry, beyond its status as an unexpected dance album, its massive track list, comprising 21 full songs, in comparison to other major records being released today, in general, what's truly causing Drake to lose it is that the world is witnessing the record's dismal performance. The truth is that when it comes to the one topic Drake has brought up repeatedly, which is top charting songs, recall that he has more songs on the Billboard than the Beatles, to go off on a whole tangent on his collaboration with J. Cole, in which he claimed that he was just one #1 song away from Michael Jackson. Drake truly got to the point where he was so fixated on the charts that this meant the world to him. And once more, even when contrasting this with the worst Drake album in the streaming era, Honestly Nevermind, which featured 3 top 10 hits and one that peaked at #1 when the album was released in Jimmy Cook's, it's incredibly poetic and insightful about the direction and trajectory of this entire hip-hop moment. Drake boasted about his steady ascent in the charts in his most recent chart-topping song, saying he would eventually surpass even the greatest musicians of all time. Ironically, Kendrick Lamar's response to this song was a diss track directed at both Drake and J. Cole. Drake is now compelled to witness his own words come to be as Kendrick Lamar's reality due to the fact that he went too far with that song. In the present, Drake's #1 successes for a number of albums have come from the sheer momentum and streaming numbers of his projects rather than from culturally significant songs like he had in his prime. On the other hand, Kendrick Lamar's releases have been creating cultural waves. Rather than the music itself, the discussions around Drake's albums have primarily focused on gimmicks. Drake is currently unable to regain his position at the top of the Billboard charts as his fall becomes more noticeable. Why? He has had difficulty creating truly outstanding hit songs, and the bloated, disorganized albums he keeps putting out have not been well received by the public. He is therefore no longer in the position of power that he once possessed. It appears that Drake will never be able to top his record, which he was so arrogant about taking for Mike, which is adding fuel to the fire of his frustration with the album's poor performance. If his career keeps on the same path and things keep getting worse, as they appear to be doing, then his words about being one step away from Mike will remain poignant. And honestly, with Drake right now, everything about his SSS4U album is indicating that it won't stay on the charts, and perhaps aside from one song in a few weeks, no one will be discussing anything from the album other than how it demonstrated that Drake's time in the spotlight is over and that he will never be able to get the huge deal he desires from his label, because what this album is doing is simply ridiculous in comparison to what Drake still thinks he is worth. All things considered, Drake is now acknowledging that Kendrick Lamar and all the other celebrities have indeed been selected over him. Drake has to deal with this reality now, and as he adjusts to the fact that his time at the center of everything is over, he has learned from his album's failure that we will see a lot more of him in the future. This is because, in terms of his career right now, despite all of the listeners he has already lost and will never get back, he still has something to gain from them. It basically comes down to the fact that, because they are even more naive than he is, his devoted fans will believe anything he says and will stick with him no matter what. Drake has come to the realization that at the very least, he has something that he can utilize to continue being a nuisance in the industry, regardless of how awful everything else appears to be for him. Because in reality, Drake's actions when the album's release was not going as planned and all signs pointed to a failure were nothing more than the dissemination of false information about the music industry's suppression of the record. He also played into practices that made his fan base support him and become even more irate with everyone else because the album did not generate the kind of revenue that he, or anyone else for that matter, had become accustomed to seeing from Drake. I mean, come on, Drake is attempting to compete with Kendrick Lamar and Taylor Swift, two of the biggest names in the music industry, and he wants to be on equal ground in terms of revenue and star power. But now he's in a situation where his music isn't doing well, and he's manipulating his fans with false narratives to make them even more angry at everyone else. It's ridiculous that he has to resort to this to make some honestly never mind numbers off of an album that only has the tracklist length of For All the Dogs and CLB on it. It's funny how far he has fallen. The absurd things Drake has accomplished since losing to Kendrick Lamar have finally caught up with him, and now we can see that his albums aren't as successful as they once were. If this record had been executed properly, it could have been an opportunity to prove that he is still a top act, or, in hip-hop, that he could still be number 2, even though Kendrick has obviously taken over and there's no longer any debate about it. Even that, however, is not taking place because this album did nothing to demonstrate to fans or the industry at large that Drake's work is not among the most dull and uninspired songs available in a field where fans are beginning to listen to more music that is genuinely advancing and innovating on some level. And once more, as I mentioned, Drake and everyone around him were going to show us that even though they are attempting to make this album failure seem like a victory, after all, winners don't have to defend themselves as much as they have been attempting to. Everyone in Drake's immediate vicinity is actually in a downward spiral. In fact, GNX's first week's 12 tracks have fared better than all of Drake and Ovo's recent first weeks combined. And it's not even close. At the end of the day, this group of people don't even like the music they are releasing or the art of it all. They have only enjoyed helping Drake's fans climb the charts and numbers. As a result, they are unsure of how to proceed at this point because they have never been left with anything but the music and not the numbers. And it's really amazing to see people like A and the rest of OVO have to completely rethink who they are because of this. It essentially demonstrates that they are Drake fans and have never been hip-hop fans, and they only like him for the most absurd reasons. As a result, Drake and everything he has been doing up to this point have already been so boring, shallow, and superficial. We won't see it yet, and Drake won't acknowledge it for a very long time, but when he finally comes to terms with the fact that he lost everything in terms of being the #1 artist on the charts, it will be obvious that his focus has been solely on the numbers. Since Drake isn't producing music that aims to push himself and test his abilities without the numbers and thrill of releasing something and seeing if it will start a trend like he did for his previous albums, it's evident that he is losing to everyone he has a falling out with, whether that be Kendrick, Caesar, The Weeknd, his label, or so many others. Drake will soon become weary of producing the same mediocre music with returns that resemble the first week of SSS4U. As this year progresses and Drake tries to make a comeback that no one else believes is possible, we will have to watch him quietly spiral out of control over the reality that he has truly lost everything. As a result, We don't know where this is all going to go or how it will affect everything that is happening with Drake yet. This record, of course, is a clear indication of it. Going forward, Drake will have to deal with the fact that he has bombed worse than ever before. We will witness the extent to which the greatest collapse of a hip-hop star in history will alter not only his career, but also the entire rap scene. Having stated that, please let me know, regarding Drake's album Failure, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about the way he is attempting to manage this situation? And as we just see how awful this debacle is, what do you think will happen next? Regarding all of this, I am eager to hear your thoughts. As I mentioned before, if you watched the entire video, please remember to subscribe and like it. It has never been more crucial, and the fact that these Drake supporters don't want to hear this really aids me. Now watch the following video to see how Drake is already attempting to find a new way to salvage his career, which is already deteriorating after he bombed and realized that things were looking bad.